Usually when we talk about a mechanical failure, there's this expectation of visible destruction.
Right, it's super obvious.
Yeah, like in engineering, you hear a loud snap or you see a frayed cable, and the mechanic just points and says, there it is. It's broken.
It's totally binary. I mean, the
Yeah.
machine is either intact or it's destroyed. There's no real mystery.
Exactly. But if you step into the world of human biology, specifically our joints, that clear mechanical logic just completely falls apart.
It really does. It's incredibly subtle.
It is. And honestly, it's vastly misunderstood. So for you, our listener today, this deep dive is looking straight into that biological blind spot. Because, we all know the golden rule of longevity, right? Keep moving.
Absolutely. Staying active is basically the best gift you can give your body.
But, and here's the hook, if movement is a gift, why does giving yourself that gift feel so much harder and, frankly, so much more punishing as the years go by?
Yeah, that frustration is so universal. And to figure out why it happens, we actually have to throw out a lot of the assumptions we usually make about joint aging.
Because normally the assumption is just, well, wear and tear. You hit a certain age, you groan when you stand up from the couch, and you just think, well, my joints are wearing out.
Like a tire, slowly losing its tread on the highway.
Right. So have we been looking at this completely backward by focusing so heavily on that physical destruction?
We really have. The source we're digging into today highlights this massive paradigm shift. The decline in mobility, so the stiffness, the extra effort you need just to climb a flight of stairs, it isn't necessarily the structural hardware grinding down.
Wait, it's not
No. It's often an ecological problem within the joint.
an ecological problem.
Yeah, I mean, the internal environment is simply functioning less efficiently than it used to. It's almost like a localized climate change happening inside your knee or your hip.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the joint isn't physically destroyed. The ecosystem supporting it is failing. And if the ecosystem is the issue, then the typical behavioral trap people fall into makes a lot of sense, even if it's entirely counterproductive.
Oh, totally. The irony of inactivity.
Right. Because when a joint becomes stiff or uncomfortable, the immediate instinctual response is just to stop moving. You sit down, you rest, you take the load off.
Which creates a vicious cycle. I mean, you move less because you're stiff, and then you become stiffened because you move less.
It compounds.
It really does. Reduced movement leads directly to weaker surrounding muscles, less flexibility, and ultimately a much more compromised joint environment.
I have to push back a little on calling it a trap, though. Like, isn't that a deeply ingrained biological instinct?
How do you mean?
Well, if you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back. If my ankle aches, resting it feels like the necessary protective response, right? Just to allow for healing.
And that instinct is perfect for an acute injury. Like if you sprain an ankle or tear a ligament, rest is absolutely the biological imperative.
Because it's actually broken.
Right. The tissue needs time to physically knit back together. But every day, age-related joint stiffness is not an acute injury. It's a shift in the environmental conditions of the joint.
Okay, I see.
So by resting a stiff, aging joint, by treating it like a sprained ankle, you are actually accelerating the exact decline you're trying to avoid.
Because you're shutting down the systems that keep it healthy.
Exactly. To maintain your independence later in life, you just have to break that cycle of inactivity.
Yeah.
But to understand why movement is the medicine here, we have to confront this major blind spot in how we think about our anatomy. The source calls it the cartilage bias.
The cartilage bias. I actually know exactly what you mean by that. If you look at any anatomical diagram in a doctor's office or, listen to a supplement commercial, cartilage gets like 100% of the spotlight.
Oh, yeah. It's all about that rubbery tissue cushioning the ends of the bones.
Right, and cartilage is vital, obviously.
Of course, it provides that shock-absorbing cap. Plus, it's what shows up clearly on medical scans, which is probably why it gets so much attention.
But focusing solely on cartilage, it completely ignores the delivery system that keeps that cartilage alive in the first place.
Yeah.
It feels like obsessively checking a car's brake pads to make sure they aren't wearing down, but completely ignoring whether or not the engine actually has any oil.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You can have brand new brake pads, but if the system has no oil, the friction is just going to overheat and seize the entire machine.
The structure is fine, but the environment is trashed.
Exactly. And in human biology, our engine oil is a very specific substance called synovial fluid.
Synovial fluid. Okay, so if the cartilage is the brake pads, synovial fluid is the biological oil stopping the friction.
Right. It's this thick, slippery liquid enclosed inside all our movable joints.
And what's its main job?
Well, its job description is massive. It lubricates the movement and absorbs physical impact alongside the cartilage. But most importantly, and this is the detail that really changes everything, it delivers nutrients.
And this is where the mechanics get really wild, right? Because cartilage doesn't actually have its own blood supply.
Zero blood supply.
Which is crazy. There are no veins running through that white rubbery tissue at the end of your femur.
None. And most tissues in your body rely on this constant network of blood vessels to, deliver oxygen and nutrients and carry away waste.
Built-in delivery service.
Exactly. But cartilage is completely avascular. It has no blood flow. So it has to get its food from somewhere else, and that somewhere else is the synovial fluid.
But wait, if it doesn't have a heart pumping blood to it, how does the fluid actually deliver those nutrients? Like, there isn't a tiny joint heart pumping this synovial fluid around, right?
No, there isn't. The pump is movement itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Think of your cartilage like a dense, wet sponge. When you take a step, the physical weight and pressure of that movement literally squeezes the cartilage.
Like wringing it out.
Exactly. That compression forces out the old waste-filled fluid.
And then when you lift your foot, taking the weight off, the sponge expands back out and just sucks in fresh, nutrient-rich synovial fluid.
You got it. Rhythmic weight-bearing movement is the literal pump that feeds your joints. If you don't move, the sponge just sits there, stagnant in its own waste.
That paints a picture.
It does. But it explains why inactivity is so devastating for age-related stiffness. You're literally starving your cartilage when you sit still.
That is a massive aha moment. So the movement isn't just about, burning calories or building muscle. It's the actual mechanical pump keeping the joint ecosystem alive.
Yes.
But that brings up the aging factor. Like, if I'm still moving, still walking, and pumping that sponge, why does the fluid stop doing its job as I get older?
For that, we had to zoom in to the molecular level of the synovial fluid itself. The fluid's ability to protect and lubricate basically comes down to a single specific molecule, hyaluronan, which is also known as hyaluronic acid.
Hyaluronan. Okay, this is the star player.
It is. It's what gives the synovial fluid its thickness, its elasticity, and all those shock-absorbing properties.
So it's all about viscosity.
Precisely. Viscosity is the key. Hyaluronan molecules are incredible at binding to water. They create this thick, gel-like consistency. In a younger joint with abundant hyaluronan, the fluid is highly viscous. It keeps the bond ends physically separated, even under really heavy loads.
But as we age, natural hyaluronan production drops off, right?
Right. And the fluid loses that binding power.
So it goes from being this thick protective gel, like, say, cold, dense maple syrup, and it slowly thins out into something closer to just, water.
Exactly. It loses that essential thickness that keeps the moving parts from grinding against each other. And when the fluid becomes watery, it just cannot maintain that protective barrier.
The friction inevitably increases.
It has to.
So the stiffness we feel in our 40s, 50s, and beyond it isn't necessarily our bones grinding away into dust. It's our joints internally drying out or just losing their liquid shock absorbers.
Yes. The hardware is often relatively fine for a very long time. The bones and cartilage are structurally intact. But the software, the synovial fluid environment, is failing to provide the necessary glide.
That makes so much sense.
And this thinning fluid explains why you can still perform the exact same activities you used to, but those activities just don't feel effortless anymore.
Right, like kneeling in the garden or carrying heavy groceries up the stairs. I mean, the body still knows the mechanics and the muscles can handle the weight, but there's this new resistance inside the joint itself.
Exactly. The movement is simply less comfortable because you are operating with a thinner, inferior lubricant.
Okay, so we have the physiological problem clearly mapped out here. The synovial fluid is thinning because of an age-related drop in hyaluronan, which spikes friction and tricks us into that vicious cycle of resting when we should actually be moving.
Right.
So how do we actually intervene and fix this internal environment? The source outlines a two-pronged approach, right? Starting with everyday foundational habits.
Yeah, because there is no magic bullet that supersedes lifestyle. Joint health requires a foundational environment to thrive, and the absolute first pillar of that foundation is consistent, gentle movement.
Because of the sponge effect. We have to keep the pump running to circulate the fluid. And It's really important to highlight the word gentle here, right? Like walking, swimming, cycling, yoga.
Exactly. Consistency matters so much more than intensity. You don't need to redline the engine to keep the oil circulating.
Right.
In fact, high-impact, intense training without proper recovery can actually cause acute wear. Rhythmic, low-impact movement provides that perfect mechanical compression and release to feed the cartilage without overloading it.
Love that. Okay, the second pillar is maintaining healthy muscles through resistance training, which, if we think about joint mechanics, strong muscles are basically external shock absorbers, aren't they?
They really are. They take the physical load before it ever even reaches the joint. Think about stepping off a curb. If your quadriceps and hamstrings are strong, they absorb the impact of that footfall. That drastically reduces the shear force transmitted through the knee joint itself
So better muscular stability means better movement efficiency.
and significantly less joint stress.
Makes total sense. Then we have diet and hydration. Vegetables, healthy fats, lean proteins. You obviously need to provide the body with the raw building blocks, but the hydration aspect is really fascinating in this context.
Oh, it's crucial.
Because if hyaluronan works by binding to water to create that thick gel, it stands to reason you actually need water in your system for it to bind to in the first place.
Hydration is the non-negotiable prerequisite here.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have all the hyaluronan in the world, but if you are chronically dehydrated, the synovial fluid just cannot achieve the volume or viscosity required to cushion the joint.
Wow. And then rounding out the foundation is recovery, right? Good old-fashioned sleep to allow for cellular repair. So those are the lifestyle pillars, but there's also the second prong of this approach, targeted internal support. Specifically, the source introduces options like joint genesis for adults looking to augment their routine.
Yes, joint genesis was developed specifically to address the exact internal mechanism we've been discussing, that age-related decline of hyaluronan.
Okay, but I have to put my skeptic's hat on here for a second because human nature being what it is, people love a quick fix.
Sure, of course.
We want to pop a pill so our knee stops aching and we can go play tennis. How is focusing on hyaluronan any different from the traditional over-the-counter pain relief mentality?
It's a great question. The distinction really lies in the underlying goal and the biological mechanism.
Right.
Traditional pain relief approaches, like, over-the-counter NSAIDs, they generally focus on blocking a symptom.
Right.
They basically interrupt the pain signal traveling from the joint to your brain.
So they basically snip the warning wire, but the engine is still running without oil.
Exactly. The friction is still happening.
Yeah.
And the underlying damage might even be accelerating because you literally don't feel the warning signs telling you to adjust your movement.
That's a scary thought.
Right.
Hmm.
But joint genesis targets the environment itself. By aiming to support hyaluronan levels, the goal is to actually enhance the thickness and hydration of the synovial fluid.
So it's trying to pour thick oil back into the system rather than just muting the check engine light on the dashboard.
That's exactly it.
Right.
But it's critical to understand that this internal support is designed to work alongside those foundational habits. It is not a replacement for them.
Right.
Supplying the body with hyaluronan won't do you much good if you're totally dehydrated and just sitting on the couch all day, allowing that sponge to dry out.
Yeah, you can't out-supplement a totally sedentary lifestyle. It's really a long-term investment. The goal isn't just, surviving the afternoon without groaning. It's about preserving active living.
Yeah.
Traveling, keeping up with family, maintaining true independence.
It's about maintaining confidence in your movement. Because when you lose confidence in your body's ability to move comfortably, your world shrinks.
It really does.
You start saying no to evening walks or to vacations or to getting down on the floor to play with your grandkids, all because you're terrified of how you'll get back up.
Man, that's heavy. But this deep dive really flips the script on getting older, doesn't it? Aging doesn't have to mean accepting a shrinking world. We just have to move past this cartilage bias and realize that our joints are, they're living ecosystems that rely on a very specific fluid to survive.
And understanding the role of synovial fluid and hyaluronan empowers you to actually change that environment.
Yeah, by combining those foundational habits, keeping the sponge pumping with gentle movement, hydrating, building those external muscle shock absorbers with targeted support for our natural lubrication system, we can see massive lifestyle benefits.
Huge benefits.
And we aren't talking about training for the Olympics here. We're just talking about living life on your own terms without that constant internal friction.
Exactly. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with something to consider, building directly on everything we've uncovered about how movement feeds the joint.
Oh, bring it on. What's the final thought?
Well, we've established that rhythmic, gentle movement is the absolute biological requirement for pumping nutrients into the cartilage and maintaining healthy synovial fluid.
Right, the sponge effect.
Right. Now, look at the reality of modern life. We place children at school desks for hours on end, starting from the age of 5. Then they graduate, and we transition them to office chairs where they sit for decades.
Wow. We have basically institutionalized the vicious cycle of inactivity right into our culture.
We have. And by enforcing this severely sedentary lifestyle from such a young age, are we inadvertently accelerating the thinning of our synovial fluid and starving our cartilage decades earlier than previous generations?
That is wild to think about.
And if our environment is so stacked against natural movement, is it ever too early to start actively managing our joints' internal ecosystem?
That is a phenomenal question. Are we functionally drying out our joints before we even hit middle age just by staring at screens all day? That is definitely something to think about the next time you realize you've been glued to your chair for 4 hours straight.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you a totally new perspective on the incredible machinery keeping you moving. Keep learning, keep the fluids pumping, and stay curious. Hopefully tomorrow morning you can step out of bed feeling just a bit more empowered about the vessel you are traveling through life in.